Hi everyone, and welcome to this video showing us how to approach the E natural minor scale for our grade 1 fast track exam. So the notes for the scale are on the screen, and I thought it'd be helpful just to go over what a scale actually is before we dive into how we approach playing it. So a scale is simply a series of notes that go up step by step and then back down step by step. So in terms of figuring out the notes, it's really simple because all that happens is whatever the scale is, we start on that note and we go round the wheel of notes one by one and then back down the other way. You've probably, by this stage in Year 8, you've probably already looked at a D major scale, perhaps even without realising it. And the reason it's really helpful for us to look at this, this one here is because once we know how to play the notes of the scale, it will really help us when we tackle our piece, because the piece uses very similar patterns to the ones that we look at in this scale. We've been used to looking at major scales, and this one's actually a minor scale. The difference between major and minor is how it sounds really. A major key or a major scale sounds quite positive and happy, whereas a minor key or a minor scale sounds a little bit more dark, a little bit more sad. So we've got the notes here. The first thing I'd like you to do is to just try and figure out what the notes are. We start here, we go all the way up to this note here, and then we come back down. The clue's in the name, it's an E natural minor scale, so we're going to start on an E. What would the rest of the notes be, please? Just take a few seconds to figure that out. Okay, let's reveal the notes and see if you were correct. I've only written them in for on the way up because the way down is the same but just in reverse. So of course we start on an E, and then if we think about our wheel of notes here, we just go round one each time. So E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and then back down D, C, B, A, G, F, E. So those are our notes. That's easy enough to work out. But in order to tackle playing it, we need to know how we play those notes, so what fingers we need to use on our violins to tackle this scale. So now that we know what the notes are, can you just take a few seconds to try and figure out what the numbers would be? So I'll help you out with the first one. If we're starting on an E, that is nearest to our open D string, and E would be our first finger on the D string, because D plus 1 is E. So if we're starting with a 1, what would the numbers be for the rest of those notes, please? Okay, let's have a look and see if you got it correct. So as I said, we start with our first finger on the D string, and as with the notes, we just add a finger each time. So 1, 2, 3, and then 0 for our open A, 1, 2, 3, and then I've put O/4 because it's an E. We technically could go over onto the open E string, so the whole scale from the start would be. But you'll notice that above the note, it's got a 4 in brackets. Now, this isn't something that we've looked at probably at this stage in our violin lessons, but we can add our little finger, and it creates the same sound as the open string. This is 4th finger on the A string. This is open E. It's the same note. It's a little bit more complicated just because our pinky finger is our weakest finger. But that's there. Ideally, we would all be using our 4th finger, but if you're really, really struggling, then you can just stick to an open E. So the whole thing, in terms of numbers, should be starting on D1, then we stretch for 2, 3, O, 1 on the A string, 2 close, 3, and then I'm going to play 4th finger, and then it just comes back down. Just like that. So it's just a series of notes. We're adding a note each time, therefore we're adding a finger each time. Now, there are a couple of things to look out for before we start playing this, and that is where we have to play what are called semitones, and those are the notes that are really close. So in the violin, those are when we have to have our fingers close to the previous finger. And I indicate those with this diagonal line, this red line. If I get my spotlight here, then I can show you. So that red line there is telling us that those two notes are right next to each other. We need to look out for those. Our 3rd finger is right next to our 2nd finger. That's normal. We're used to doing that. That's the pattern that we always use. This one's a little bit more unusual. Going from our 1st finger on the A string to our second finger, instead of it being a gap, we need it to be right next door to our first finger. And then of course the same on the way down. So before we tackle the scale, I'd like to start off by looking at the relationship between our first and second finger in this scale. So can you please get your instruments? Let's find the very first note of the scale by playing an open D string, and then our first finger, and then freeze there. That is our first note, that's our E, okay? I want us to just play a few patterns using our first finger on the D string, followed by our second finger on the D string. And for this one, there's no diagonal line. Therefore, we can play it how we normally would, with a gap in the middle, okay? So I'll play a pattern, you play it back. Here I go. You. Me. You. Me. You. Me. You. Fantastic. Now, don't relax too much. I want us to now just go over onto the A string, and I want to do the same thing, starting on our first finger on the A string. If you're not sure, play the open A first. Okay, but this time there is a diagonal line there, showing us that our second finger needs to be really close to our first finger. So instead of going there, which is how we're used to doing it, there needs to be no gap. All right. So we'll do the same thing. I'll play a pattern, you play it back. Here I go. You. Me. You. Me. You. Me. You. Fantastic. So now we just need to make sure that we understand that if we're playing on the D string, there is a gap between our first and second finger. On the A string, there is no gap. All right. So now let's try and put those together. And we're going to do a similar thing with a pattern. I'll play it first, you play it back. We're going to start on the D string with our first finger, then our second finger, then our first finger on the A string, then our second finger. Okay, so if I show you on the camera, 1, then a gap to 2, then 1 on the A string, and then no gap to 2. All right, so I'll go first. Get ready? Now you. Me. You. Me. You. Fantastic. And into rest position. So that's the tricky corner, really. Once we've done that, all we need to do is include the notes in between. All right. So now, can we please try saying the numbers as I play it? So for now, don't worry about playing it, just follow the music. It might be useful just to point at the screen as I do this. So follow the music, say the numbers as I play it, okay? And I'll do it as well. So starting off with our first finger on the D string, and it'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, open A. 1, 2 close, 3, 4. Good. I hope you're saying the numbers there as well. You'll notice that I'm sticking with a 4th finger for that top E, and then the open string is just for if you're finding that really tricky. Okay, so instruments up. Join in with me this time. So bows on the D string. Find your first note, and let's give it a go after 4. Saying the numbers as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Open A. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. Let's try that one more time. This time don't say the numbers, but I'll still give you some clues as we go so we can make sure we're doing the right thing. Bows up. Find your first note. Check that your thumb is a happy face in your bow hold and you can tap your little finger on the top. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Now stretch for 2. 3 next door. Onto the A string. 1, 2 next door. Stretch for 3. Stretch for 4. Excellent. Really good job. You'll notice I said stretch for 4. That's how to make sure that your little finger is in the right place. You can't just kind of be hoping that it will fall in the right direction. It's got to be the tip of your little finger coming down from above onto the string. All right. A good way to prepare for that is just to, before we start, just tap all 4 fingers down on the string, up and down, to make sure in the right place. If you're struggling to get your little finger in the right place, if your little finger's flat, then you just need to bring your elbow round a bit so that all 4 fingers will tap easily on the top of the string. Okay? Good. Let's try that again, but this time we're going to carry on. And once we reach the top note, we're going to come back down again. I haven't written the numbers there, but you shouldn't need them because we'll have just played the notes. Okay, I'll call them out anyway. The same sort of tempo. Here we go. So find your first note. And after 4, let's give this a go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, stretch for 2, 3 next door, open A, 1, 2 next door, stretch for 3, stretch for 4, back down to 3, and 2, 1 next door, open A, over to 3, 2 next door, and 1. And into rest position. Good job, well done. Now once you're familiar with those notes, the next challenge is to be able to just get it a little bit quicker. We'll just try it a little bit quicker now, and then I'll give you a couple of tips that are worth using when you're practicing this to just get it a little bit more fluent. So for now, let's just try and do it a little bit quicker, and we'll try and go this sort of speed. Give it a go at that speed straight away. Don't worry if you're struggling, but we'll just give it a go anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Open A. Close. 4th finger. Back down. Open A. Really good. Now once we've done that, my top tip for practicing scales, and I mentioned this with the grade 2 scales as well, is to do what I call practicing in rhythms. And that's where we just play around a little bit with the rhythm so that we are exercising our mind and kind of practicing tricky corners at different times without even realising it. So the first rhythm we would do is we would play the 1st and 3rd and 5th and 7th note long, and the notes in between short. So it would sound like this. Just join in with me and see if you can do that. If you can't, don't worry, this is just something to bear in mind when you're practicing the scale. Bows up on the string. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once you're really comfortable playing it in that rhythm, then we reverse it. So the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 7th notes are short and the notes in between are long. So that would sound like this. Let's see if we can play that rhythm together straight away. Instruments up, bow on the string. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once you're already familiar with that rhythm, the idea is when you go back to doing the normal straight rhythm, it should feel a little bit easier because you've already done a couple of things to make it more challenging than it needs to be. All right. So just to finish off, let's try and play it as it should be heard. And then you've got some tips there to practice the scales. So instruments up, find your first note, get your thumb ready, get your little finger tapping on top of the bow, and let's give this a go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And into rest position. Good job. So when you're tackling this scale, watch this video, but also make sure that you practice in those different rhythms to get really familiar with it, so that it's much easier when you go to playing it for real. And then once you've watched this video, go on to the next one to learn how to play the arpeggio of the E natural minor. Okay, good. Well done, and I'll see you for the next video.